I guess one of the places we should probably start is just looking at equity stories. So, what does that look like for the business? You're going into a sale process, and what does that transaction look like? Are you going to go and speak to trade acquirers? Are you going to go speak to private equity? Because depending on which route you go down, it can often yield quite different results in terms of how you should prepare the business for sale. And thinking about that buyer population, who you're going to speak to early, is there anyone that you want to sort of get ahead of a potential process? So maybe that's a good place to start in terms of what we can do in terms of Cooper Parry to help getting businesses ready for sale and talking about that equity story.
Yeah, maybe if I can chip in there, Niall, I think that's a really key point around, if you step back on this, you want to really try and maximise the value from what could be a once-in-a-lifetime transaction, and you also want to mitigate the risks and be on the front foot, as Niall touched on. And I think there's a piece there around it's never too early to start thinking about your business and looking at it through the lens of perhaps an aggressive buyer who might be looking for value chips and the areas where they could potentially get concerned about the business. So what we're finding is we're doing quite a lot ourselves, and we're seeing others in the market looking at an early stage readiness assessment of the business on a holistic basis. So looking at the financial track record, the tax and legal environment, and any sort of key risks that will be coming out of that. I don't know if you'd like to just touch on from a legal and tax perspective.
So at Cooper Parry Law, we specialise in M&A legal advice, which means that it allows us to work with both buyers and sellers. So when we're acting for a seller, we know what our buyers are looking for. So what we'd always advise is to get a very good electronic data room up and ready as early as possible to then store all the necessary information. Now this involves us digging deep into the company, looking at the contracts that you have, making sure that actually if you can sell, they're still legitimate and legal, so change of control provisions. Also considering if there's any litigation issues that have to be resolved prior, because that's obviously something a buyer will be concerned about when it comes to it. Also, that making sure that we've got employment contracts for each employee, which is surprising that there are many companies we come into don't. And yeah, that's really it from the legal side. How about the tax?
So thanks, Emily. Yeah, from a tax perspective, it's really important to be on the front foot and be prepared, invest the time to identify any potential tax risks so they can be mitigated or resolved. There are a couple of hot topics that we're seeing at the moment on deals. One of those being off payroll workers, so having a review of those arrangements to see if there are any potential tax risks is really key. Another one where we are seeing particularly aggressive stances at the moment is on share incentives, and if there are, to make sure they are tax effective. And if there are any potential issues, it's really important that those are rectified as far in advance of a sale process as possible to make sure that the tax efficiency of those plans is retained.
Yeah. I think there's also, from a value perspective, it's worth thinking about potential upsides as well as risks. And when we look at it from a financial perspective, we'd look at it in terms of how robust are the earnings, but also are there any adjustments that you could make from your statutory numbers to present the business on a more reasonable perspective going forward? Looking at working capital and net debt, again, there are ways that you can, these are not black and white issues, you can actually make some judgment calls on these, and if you can put a robust defence around those and put that into a pack that goes into a data room in front of bidders, that gives you some first mover advantage on that as well, which I think is really important. And I think finally just a bit around forecast is crucial. We're finding a lot businesses we're looking at just don't have robust enough forecasts that are able to run sensitivities and properly justifiable assumptions behind those. So really critical to think about that early as well. And those forecasts obviously include tax matters as well.
I think that's a great point. And I guess one of the things that we see in the market sometimes is, vendors will get approached an off-market deal where they sometimes get bounced into a process and they become very reactive in terms of responding to information requests. And I guess what you've outlined there and stuff in terms of getting it into the data room is that by doing this pre-sale planning piece at the start, you can be very proactive in identifying issues and things, because sometimes I guess the worst thing that we find on deals is we get 6 months into due diligence, and some of these issues get unearthed midway through when they could have been identified through doing this stage earlier. And I think that causes a lot of frustrations with vendors, because it's at that point where deals start to become really protracted in terms of timings, whereas if you do the work up front, you can head off a lot of these issues early.
I think buyers hate surprises, and surprises destroy value. They'll automatically start to reduce their price if they're finding things like this, and they get more worried, and you start to lose credibility. And this doesn't necessarily need a lot of work done up front, and you can't always resolve all of these points, but you can at least identify them quickly and work out how you will manage the messages around those points, which I think, again, establishes credibility.
I think going from what you just said in terms of what you can manage, I mean, third-party consent is one of the key things that we see, and that's making transactions more prolonged, because a third party isn't as key to push matters through and to get your transaction over the line. So it's identifying what third-party consents you need, and then putting a strategy in place to actually get that over the line, because that's what we've been seeing most, that actually we can get everything ready, but when you've got a third party that you have no control over, that's what's causing the delays.
Yeah.
And to the point on upsides, I mean, we're seeing a lot on deals where you can actually ascribe some value to tax losses if it's an early stage company or something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, we look at tax assets as part of what we do. Tax losses, as you've just mentioned, sort of if you do any R&D, for example, any R&D benefits, any Section 455 tax refunds, they can all go to price and increase it.